Finally, LSU pops a quarterback commit. We'll tell you about him. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. LSU on Monday, just less than 48 hours after beating Florida, pops a commitment from one of the big-time prospects that was in Tiger Stadium on Saturday night. Peyton Houston from Evangel in Shreveport picked LSU over Oklahoma and Southern Cal. This is a surprise. There's no other way to say it. If you look at the on-3 or rivals projections, it was an overwhelming feeling that he was going to land at initially Southern Cal and then Oklahoma. But LSU clearly made a big push here late in this process to get Peyton Houston committed. I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts on Peyton Houston. Then I want to talk about the rest of this 2027 class. But I want to remind you this. So less than a week ago, when Shea Dixon from On3, the Bengal Tiger, was here on the show, as he is every week, we talked about Peyton Houston because at the time, it was last week. So he was less than a week away from his commitment. Houston was going to be visiting LSU for the Florida game. But the feeling then, a week just in the last week, was that Oklahoma had the lead. This is what Shea said a week ago.
For a while, Matt, people thought he was going to go to Southern Cal, or at least that was the opinion of Steve Wiltfong, some of the national people. And then Oklahoma started to push, and look, LSU as well. All of them were pushing for Peyton Houston coming out of Evangel. He had a great year a year ago. Now he's a junior, so he's starting out his junior year at Evangel. But that's kind of the trio of teams that were really among many that had offered, that were kind of thought to be in the lead group. And was in Norman this past weekend. They beat Michigan. He's got a good relationship with that staff. So a lot of them said, hey, we're putting our picks in on Oklahoma. USC might be a little far from home here. Sooners had a big weekend. This could have been kind of the thing that helps him feel like that could be the pick. I'm still on wait and see because Peyton Houston announces Monday, and this weekend he'll be at the LSU Florida game. So LSU getting the final visit, getting the chance to talk to him and his family before he makes that announcement. I'll wait and see. I don't think this one is one where LSU just doesn't have a shot and he's going to end up at Oklahoma. So battling it out in a quarterback class with a few Louisiana kids who have SEC offers, and then the younger brother of your starting quarterback who's in your border state that you typically recruit.
So that being Colton Nussmeier, and then, of course, Elijah Haven, the other 2027 prospect. So I want to get into what this commitment means for those guys, but let's deal with what's here in the immediacy. So first of all, amazing job by the entire LSU staff. Houston is a kid from Evangel Christian in Shreveport. He's listed at 5'10", 202. He is a 4-star in the composite, the number 94 overall player in the country. He's a top 10 quarterback, number 8. When you look at all of the different rating services, actually ESPN ranks him as the 77th overall prospect and the number 1 quarterback in the country. And I say it all the time. If you're an everydayer, you know what I'm about to say. When it comes to recruiting, it's less about star ranking, rating, all that stuff. It's who offered you. Well, it's LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, Clemson, Southern Cal, Georgia, Penn State, Notre Dame, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Miami, Pitt, Houston, Purdue, TCU, Arkansas, Colorado, Tennessee, Baylor. You get it. Like, offers from everybody. So this is a really special kid who actually in a game last year in high school accounted for over 800 yards in one game. So you were talking about a really dynamic player, both as a runner and as a passer. And this is a guy that darn near everybody in the country wanted. You can say 5'10" is the size of concern. I'll trust all the different coaches and recruiters who offered this guy, who think he's an elite level talent, that they know what they're doing. So a big get, obviously, not only to keep a top 10 quarterback in the country in the state of Louisiana, but also away from Oklahoma, who you may end up playing every year. We'll see what the permanent opponents end up shaping out like, but Be it, had he gone to Oklahoma, he would have been in the Southeastern Conference and you would have had to play him, like we talk about all the time. It's never great when you lose guys in state, but you'd much rather them lose a player to Southern Cal than to Oklahoma, where you might have to actually see him again. So there's the significant part of this. Now, I think another point of, you can ask maybe the how. I want to remind you, if you were here, whenever we talked about Tristan Keys flipping away from LSU to Tennessee, we talked about high school NIL. And while you can do NIL deals with players in the state of Louisiana, you can't do NIL deals, high school NIL, with players in the state of Mississippi. So just as a recap, because Peyton Houston is in Louisiana and Louisiana allows high school NIL, there is no doubt that LSU has NIL funds, a deal with Peyton Houston right now. So he is going to be paid a high school NIL deal through the collective now before he shows up on campus. And as a reminder, all of those contracts are structured such that if the player decommits or flips, they have to repay the funds that they're paid out through their high school NIL deal. So it's just much more binding now when you have commitments from in-state players like Peyton Houston. So I'm not saying something won't change between now and December, but it's less likely that you would see Peyton Houston flip because of the high school NIL component of this. So just something worth filing away. Also, while LSU had committed, the number I was told, $1 million to Tristan Keys. Now, they couldn't pay him in high school. They couldn't pay him because he's from Mississippi until he gets to campus. But they had $1 million earmarked for Tristan Keys. And when you had that number earmarked for a player who then flips out of the class, we saw this last year with Bryce Underwood and Jakeem Stewart. So whenever those guys who were committed that you had a lot of money earmarked for, they're no longer in the class, now all of a sudden you have budget. So this is very likely a situation where LSU was able to go make a late push for Houston because they had budget maybe to increase their offer to him to get him as a part of this class. So Peyton Houston becomes the first quarterback commit for the class of 2027. And I say first because something else Shea Dixon told us is that LSU would very realistically would like to sign 2 quarterbacks in the class of 2027. So let me step aside briefly. When I come back, I want to talk about what this means for Colton Nussmeier, for Elijah Haven, and how LSU is in this whole spot with the quarterback dominoes. So I'll make all that make sense when we come back and continue here. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Quick question for all of you college football fans. If you could go back in time and sit in the front row of your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would be the game. These aren't just hats. It's the same vintage styles that fans wore back in the 80s and the 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did back then. When you use the code Locked On, it'll get you your vintage hat for $16.99. So head to thegamecaps.com. That's thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code Locked On for an exclusive discount because legends wear the game. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots that deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love the most, how portable they are. It's big taste and a tiny shot that you can take anywhere and get the boost when you need it. So find your favorite flavor. I love the extra strength grape. You can find yours that you would love to try next. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorite you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com. That's 5hourenergy.com or at Amazon today. And finally, we're brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So, Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So Peyton Houston is committed for 2027. Let's talk about how LSU is in the position they are. Many of you, especially if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this a bunch, but we'll go through it in the instance that maybe you're not aware. So, of course, LSU had Bryce Underwood committed for a year for the class of 2025. When Bryce Underwood left LSU at the altar a week before signing day, the Tigers did not sign a quarterback in the 2025 signing class. Naturally, they also saw both A.J. Swan and Ricky Collins enter the transfer portal. So the Tigers came into the season with just two quarterbacks on scholarship, with Garrett Nussmeier returning for a fifth season and Colin Hurley going into his second year. The Tigers had to go into the transfer portal. They added Michael Van Buren. That's where they sit as of now. Well, because they had Bryce Underwood committed so early, most of the premier elite 2026 prospects for this coming class did not want to commit to LSU because Bryce Underwood was there. And the fear was, why would an elite prospect come to LSU to sit behind Bryce Underwood for 2 years? So LSU was so far behind on the 2026 class by the time, think about right now. Peyton Houston's committed right now to LSU for 2027, right? He's committed right now in September of 2025 to sign in December of 2026 for the 2027 class. So most of that's done. The premier prospects commit a year in advance. So LSU was so far behind in 26, they tried to get in late on a flip. They were in the final two for Bo Bentley, who picked Oklahoma. Now LSU is trying to flip Landon Duckworth from South Carolina, and they may be able to do that. Just to be transparent, they may have an opportunity to flip Landon Duckworth from South Carolina and get a top 10 2026 quarterback. However that unfolds, they're going to go in the portal after this season because you're losing Garrett Nussmeier, obviously, to graduation. You have Colin Hurley and Michael Van Buren. Even if you add Duckworth, you don't have a quality proven starting quarterback. And in the modern day and age in college football, there's just no reason to go into a season without one. So I fully expect LSU will go into the portal in that will now be the early January portal window. The question is, are they looking to add a depth piece or are they looking for Jaden Daniels? Not a Heisman winner, just a guy that's been a multi-year starter at his program that can come in and be an immediate starter, or at least compete to be that at LSU. That remains to be seen. But you can see how the quarterback numbers are going to start to reset for 2027. If you do keep Hurley and Van Buren in a transfer, and if you get Duckworth, now you're starting to stockpile quarterbacks a little bit. But 2027 is a very interesting year because you have elite level quarterbacks for 2027 in Louisiana. When you start looking at Elijah Haven, who of course is the number one for 2027, the number one quarterback in the country in the composite rankings for 2027. And then Peyton Houston is also a top 10 player. So Haven is the number 15 overall player, the number one quarterback. So I know every LSU fan that's looking at this right now is going, how in the world is taking Peyton Houston going to limit your opportunity to get Elijah Haven? For whatever it's worth, right now, Elijah Haven is a 98% projection to go to the University of Florida. That could obviously change if Billy Napier is not there. But Colton Nussmeier is the number 6 quarterback in the country. And then Peyton Houston is the number 8 quarterback in the country. So Colton Houston right now, Wilt Fong and others have put in their projections for Colton Nussmeier, Garrett's younger brother, who's a lefty who, by the way, is 6'3.5", 200 pounds. He's taller than Nuss, and he's a lefty, and he's got a big arm. He's out of Flower Mound, in the Dallas area. So you could conceivably end up with Colton Nussmeier and Peyton Houston in this class. And I wouldn't rule out Elijah Haven and how things could evolve throughout the year. But the bottom line is, I think this staff wants to take 2 quarterbacks for 2027. And those are the 3 primary targets, right? With Houston, Haven, and Nussmeier. You'd love to get 2 of those 3. It'll be interesting to see, and they're being transparent with all these guys that they plan on taking 2. Now, it'll be interesting to see if elite level quarterbacks will sign in a class with another elite level quarterback, or if they want to be the only one. The days of Matt Flynn, Jamarcus Russell seem like that's a distant memory, not something that we're likely to see anymore in the modern age of college football and recruiting with NIL and transfer portal. You're just not likely to see multiple elite quarterbacks. But LSU's committed to doing that here for 2027. You've got one in Houston who's a top 10 quarterback. Nussmeier would seem like the likely other who may commit either way. And the bottom line is, if any of these guys wanted to commit, LSU is not going to pass on their commitment. You're talking about top 10 players at that position nationally, and you would love it if LSU was in on Elijah Haven. I absolutely think that having Peyton Houston committed probably is a deterrent for Elijah Haven. I don't know that it's a deterrent for Nussmeier, who, if he follows the path of his brother and his dad in the state and wants to play at LSU, would come no matter what the situation is if ultimately he picked LSU. So I think there's a very likely scenario that you could end up with Peyton Houston and Colton Nussmeier in this class. What does that mean for Elijah Haven? Time will tell, and we'll wait and see. But the Tigers want to take 2 for 2027. They've got 1, and that should be celebrated. You got an elite-level quarterback committed in Peyton Houston, and you nabbed him away from Oklahoma at the 11th hour when it seemed like he was going to be a Sooner. So a great day for LSU as they've started to stabilize the most important position in organized team sports, quarterback. After missing a 25 quarterback, you're bumping up against the deadline here in 26, and you might go back-to-back classes without one. Well, now you're back on track with an elite-level quarterback committed for 2027. Long way to go before signing day, the December signing day in December of 2026. But to have Houston on board is a great jumpstart for LSU for that class of 2027. By the way, if you are looking at LSU's 2027 class already, it's a year in Louisiana following the bumper crop in 2026 for LSU, but in the 2026 class, we know with Lamar Brown and hopefully a flip of Blaine Bradford, we'll see. But Peyton Houston becomes the first 2027 commitment. Again, quarterbacks like to commit early and get their spot in their class. So Peyton Houston, the first commit for LSU's 2027 class. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this bonus episode of Locked On LSU. Do me a favor, if you are on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.